1, 2025.
Yes.
Turning it right over to you guys right away.
Sure. Rebecca Grill, the city manager. I'll be going through the budget overview with Julie, our finance director. I know in the past she started more with the capital improvement program. We wanted to cover more of a high level of the budget challenges that we're facing right now, and then go into the capital improvement projects, but making no decisions or anything tonight. So more of from a questions component, and then if you have any comments overall. I always like to start with reminding people what our strategic plan focus areas are. So there's 6 that the city has. You can all read, so I won't read them to you, but it's a good reminder as we start this process what our roadmap is. So I move to the next screen, and I have the first 4 crossed out because we have a lot of budget challenges this year, so it impedes a lot of our ability to do strategic initiatives, and challenges our even ability to maintain this status quo. So hopefully we don't have those all things crossed out, but it's just a good visual reminder of the challenges that we are going to be facing. So, red always helps with reminding people something. So, all right, so just going over some of the limitations. Obviously, we've talked about this before, but there's an over-reliance on property taxes in the state of Wisconsin. Most municipal governments are financed by that. In Wisconsin, other states do not have that. They use sales taxes, fees, that type of thing. We also rely a lot on state aids. There was recently the Act 12 2023, the state legislator is now setting aside a penny of the sales tax, more under state aid to go to certain services like police, fire, public works, but that is still a limited amount. We have the expenditure restraint program, which we'll talk about a little bit more. The levy limits, we'll talk about. Municipal services payment, I don't know if I need to talk about that anymore right now. But that's a challenge, so we're only getting funded the 37.6 or 4, I forget, percent reimbursement. And then we have a lot of infrastructure challenges, a lot of facility maintenance. We'll talk about a lot of those things today: repairs, replacement, lead pipe, PFAS, our water and storm projects. Public safety continues to grow. It's an important component of the budget, but just so there's an awareness that that is something that continues to grow. And salary and benefits are 75% of the budget. So when we're talking about additions or reductions, it's mostly going to be related to people, or else it's going to be some type of service delivery. Then we have to remember taxpayers. We can't be overly burdening them with increasing taxes from year to year. And then our debt capacity. That is something that is a concern, but it's not as big of a concern that it had been previously here. We're more under the levy limits and debt service adjustment, which we'll get into. Any questions on any of these? Okay. So here's a little bit more about Act 12. So as I mentioned, 20% of the sales tax was adding for shared revenue, supplemental aid for police, fire, EMS. It limited personal property taxes for businesses. They did give us some funding to make up for that. There's innovation grants. We talked a little bit about this last night with the EMS discussion, but it's really to encourage municipalities to work together, partner more, transfer services to another business to save money. There's some adjustments to the TIDs, which are not beneficial to cities, but they're just listed there. So that was kind of a one-time fix. So we got the bump. It helped us close the gap or afford during that year, unless we have an extreme amount of increase for sales taxes. It doesn't really make a difference going forward as far as helping with our budget mitigation for the gaps. So we haven't talked about this enough, but there's reimbursement, the municipal services payment. It's like a pilot program. There's the funding I mentioned. So our entitlement amount is 2.7 million. So I like the word entitlement, but it doesn't follow through on actually what the definition is there. So we get a little over $1 million, and then so the taxpayers are subsidizing 1.7 million. So it's a $72 impact on the average home. That doesn't necessarily mean that people's taxes would go down $72, but it would help maybe not have them go up or something like that. Expenditure restraint program. This is a state aid program that is given to municipalities who limit growth in spending. So it's based on the rate of inflation plus growth in the property values. So in the past, the city of Oshkosh might have been under this constraint. We're no longer under that. We're under the levy limits, which is unfortunate because last year, I think with the inflation rate, it was like 7 or 8% you could increase your.
Oh, I didn't have it, sorry.
It was a lot. But if we remain within our budget, we get 1.5 million a year, which is a good portion. So, and the average ERP limit we've had is 3.2 over the past 10 years. So just a little history about expenditure restraint. It was started in 1990. So because the state aid was based on spending, so people were encouraged to spend more in order to get more state aid. So that's why it was implemented. In 94, they limited it to 5 mils, and it was limited, the limit was changed to the general fund. And then also, the funding was set at $42 million for 240 municipalities. That didn't go up till 2003, where it went up to 58 million for 56 more municipalities, and it's remained at that same amount since, and now we have more people participating. So this is the different payments we've gotten from 2016 till now. So they have gone up.
So the dollar amounts have varied. So even though the state has had the same flatline amount based off of the number of municipalities participating, our amount that we receive has gone up and down.
So some municipalities might not get as much funding, so they might choose not participate in the program from year to year if they need to buy a big purchase or do some additional spending in a year. They would forego the payment, which would affect the rest of them.
Because you can do the year on, year off type of
Yes.
cycle if your budget needed it.
Yeah, unfortunately here, ours is a little more significant, so you'd have to make it up significantly, so. And then diving into levy limits. So this is something that prevents municipalities from raising their basic levy by more than the net new construction from last year to the current year. It's tied to that because there's a feeling that as you're having more construction, you might need to have more services, so you're gonna need that increase. Net new construction is the value of real estate over a specific period of time. It's new and improved buildings. If you do demolish buildings, it takes from that number. So this is completely separate from the expenditure restraint. Has nothing to do with CPI or inflation. It just has to do with our net new construction. And the TIDs are, if we have something in a TIF, it's not, and it's new, it's not included in that new construction until whatever, the 25 years. So this has become very important for Oshkosh now because of the debt service adjustment, which we'll get into. Any questions on levy limit? Started in 2005. There used to be a floor, so you would always be guaranteed that you could go up 2% regardless. That was taken out. So basically 0 is the floor now. So fully developed or communities that are slow growth or ones that are utilizing a lot of TIDs, that really impacts your ability to increase the levy. And I'll let Julie talk about this.
Before you do that, just something to note, just because you were talking about it's not new construction. So when we have developments that occur in this city, and we get those without having to do a TID, without having to do tax incremental financing. I won't name specific projects. Once those go on the books, those are significant hits to our net new construction, where anytime we TIF something, to your point, it's 25 years, 27 years before we're going to feel that. So when we've got $100 million developments occurring at different spots in this community, or when we bring in new business to this town, that's why those things are so important, that if we're not doing it well enough from this point forward, it's going to hurt.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Not saying I'm a fan of TIF, so I'm trying not to say that I'm not, but it's when we're able to get projects going that don't require those.
That is more beneficial to the levy limit. Yes.
So on this spreadsheet, I was trying to show in gray the net new construction since 2016. So if you remember from the last slide, there used to be a floor of at least 2%. From 2016 on, we've never even reached what used to be the floor, except for in 2018, which was a TIF closure year, and we would not have hit the 2% floor if it wasn't for the TIF closure. So, I mean, for me, I wanted to show that percentage and the dollar amount increase that has caused the tax levy to be allowed to be increased. So last year, the 2024 tax levy is for the 2025 budget. We had less than 1% net new construction, so that was about $234,000 that we were allowed to increase our tax levy last year. When we're talking about a base tax levy of about $34 million, so that's a very low percentage, less than 1% obviously. The column in yellow is what I started talking about a lot last year during some of these budget workshops, and I want to keep talking about it. And it's the debt adjustment on the levy limit worksheet. That is what the city has been able to use in the past to increase the levy above and beyond the net new construction amount. So what that line item does is say, if you have, and this is, I tried putting this in our memo for the workshop also, but if you have, say, $15 million that you are going to be spending on the next fiscal year on debt, principal, and interest payments, you could put up to $15 million in this debt adjustment to increase your tax levy. When the levy limits were first put into place, that whole 15 million was already baked into your levy. So municipalities didn't need to use that levy limit adjustment. Because of the levy limits, just funding typical operations became harder and harder. So this adjustment line item started getting used more and more. So even if you still only have $15 million of debt, principal and interest payments in your budget. As you can see, in 2016, we used about 3.3 as a levy limit adjustment to increase our levy to pay for debt, principal, and interest. Then you came down to 2024, and we're at almost 12.9 million of that 15 million. And I'm using 15 million as an arbitrary number. But that's that gap that I'm trying to talk about, is we used to have a very large gap that would allow the council and staff to say, we feel comfortable with doing up to a 3% levy limit increase, even if our net new construction was only at 1%. That gap is drastically reduced to the point that now we're really going to be almost restricted to what our net new construction increases. This is smaller, but I was trying to show the point of, this is an example of an actual levy limit worksheet. It takes the previous year tax levy, subtracts off what you use for your debt adjustment. That's why you never want to use your full debt levy. You only use what you absolutely have to use, because it immediately subtracts it off the next year. Comes to the new subtotal. That's what is used to calculate the net new construction. That's shown right here. If we had a TIF closure, that would be shown on this line. So that's that difference that you're seeing, that is the increase in your tax levy based off of net new construction. Then down here, you can, personal property, there's some differences going on there too, but total adjustments, that's on the second page of the levy limit worksheet, and that's what we are mainly talking about here. That line E is the main item that is used for municipalities on the levy limit worksheet. It's saying you can increase your levy by the amount of general obligation debt authorized for principal and interest payments the following year. So again, if you have $15 million of debt principal or interest that you have to pay in the next budget, that's the amount that you could put on this line item. I use the example of the 2023 levy limit worksheet where we had to use 12.9 million, because I wanted to show how then in the 2024 levy limit worksheet, that was what was subtracted off right off the bat, the exact dollar amount. So this does not include revenue bonds, because water, sewer, storm that take out the revenue bonds, they're supposed to recoup the money to pay off the revenue bonds through the user rates. So that's separate from this completely. I believe I showed you this last year at one of our budget workshops, but I added the 2024 line item. So again, we went from our gap being about 70% to now we're at about 4%. So, I mean, it's the double-edged sword. You can take out more debt, so then ideally you would have a bigger gap, but at the same time that's going to increase your principal interest payments, so you don't necessarily have that bigger gap. The more debt you take out, one way or another, the taxpayer is going to end up paying for it. So that allows you to increase your tax rate, which isn't necessarily what the council wants to do either. So it's either way the taxpayer pays for it, it's just how. But does this kind of make sense? I know this is kind of a unique item that the council has not had to deal with in the past.
We just wanted to make sure that we spelled it out for the council, but also for staff and the citizens too, that just to let people know the challenges that we're really facing. And again, personnel costs are more than 75% of our budget. And then I mentioned the public safety growth. So this is just, and this is, you know, the cost of the service. So this is nothing to say that anything about police and fire. This, people want the police and fire, they do a great job. But this is just demonstrating as we, you know, the costs that go up from year to year. So the police budget is now 30% of our general fund budget, and fire is 31.18. With, you know, so each year it's going to go up more. This is where the importance of working on a joint fire department comes into play, because then you would take out the fire. You'll have to reset your debt, your levy limit, remove that for the first year, so you might not get the increment but going forward. So just letting people know this is why it's important for us to explore that. And then these are just some future projections, the increases, so.
Can you go back to the projected increases? That is just based on trend lines, or that's where you think that the market's going to go, or that's where you think is?
I tried being conservative based off of prior year averages.
Okay, thank you.
And sorry for, I see my 2026 budget gap got cut off a little bit, so I apologize for that. But this is a very high level overview before we start working on the operating budget. This is before departments even look at addressing, what changed from last year's budget to this year's budget and different line items. But if we eliminate the drawdown of fund balance, the 5.3 million that was put in there in the 2025 budget, we would also remove the contingency of 1.6 million. So then, I'm trying to show the offsetting cost of living, salary projections. I put in 2 million based off of 75% of our budget being personnel. I also put in 850,000 as a very, I'd say conservative estimate, but obviously we also would rather show it high and hope it comes in lower. So we obviously don't have that number yet. So again, almost 2.8 million just for personnel. And then the increase in shared revenue based off of the last change, and that is tied to sales tax now, that I have received from DOR is projected to show an increase of about 480,000 for the city in 2026. But that leaves us with a budget gap of about 6.1 million.
So here are a few mitigation options, but really they only last for a year. So reducing the costs, salary benefit adjustments, reduce staff, cut services, increase revenue, the fees. You have to be careful with expenditure restraint that way if you're going to spend more. Referendum, you have to think about the impact on taxpayers, and the school district just had a referendum. I'm not suggesting that we do a referendum. I don't want to be here when a referendum has to occur. So it is just an option. And then also what we're trying to get happen is the full funding of the municipal services. But again, unless you're continuing to reduce things year to year, more and more staff or more and more services, it's only a 1 year mitigation. Some of the longer term, as I mentioned, the joint fire department, and I'm going to keep saying that probably till, 2026 or 27, until we hopefully have one. That will help. And then if there's some state action, even restoring the floor to the 2% levy limit, that would help. Changing the funding structure to reduce reliance on property taxes, that's not likely to be changing anytime soon, but.
And to be fair, neither of those are all that likely to happen anytime soon, correct? And staying with MSP the way that it's looking like is not something we can count on to come in and save us.
That would be a nice thing that might happen at the last minute, but I would
We need to anticipate that it doesn't.
that it's going to happen, yes.
Minimum 2 years before that, probably. Next budget cycle.
So, or, there might be other things, but these are, some things that I know for sure will make a difference. One of them is more under our control, and the rest.
And this is extremely tiny, so I apologize for that. But this is basically the first page that was sent in the, down on agenda quick. Basically, it's just showing all the asks for the first 5 years. I mean, we have the departments working on a 10-year budget, but this summary shows the first 5 years. I know in the past, the geo jet line item, which is currently at 30 million in the past, Long Range Finance had recommended it stay between 18 and 20 million. Last year, Mark had said let's stay between 20 and 22 million. Right now, we're at 30 million. Last year, I wasn't really told any set guidelines on where we wanted to be with revenue bonds. Obviously, we have some very large projects going on out right now, so revenue bonds, the number has been high the last few years, which we haven't necessarily taken out all those revenue bonds yet because some of the projects are waiting until they get going further before we take out the debt for it. But I wanted to include this as a high-level summary of what we're looking at right now. It's over 85 million the first, well, all of the years, but the first 3 years are the lowest, and then it only gets higher right now. Some notable projects, again, I just picked some of the high dollar ones. I don't think any of these will surprise you. I think we've talked about a lot of these already. But just kind of a summary. Facilities, we know that we've been estimating about 10 million at least per year of geo debt just on facilities. So we know there's a lot of facility projects coming down the road besides for the utility projects. You have other projects, the water projects, clear wells. On the next slide, some of the outstanding projects. So projects that you don't see on the 2026 CIP summary spreadsheet, but are still under construction or still being worked on. So that's where the clear wells, approximately 90 million has previously been in the CIP. Ozone liquid oxide, that one, over 21 million has previously been in the CIP. Different wastewater treatment plant, collection system projects, they're still outstanding. So, again, just kind of a projects outstanding list.
So on that 90 for the clear wells, have we already borrowed that, or would that be on top of the 30 million in the CIP to borrow?
We have not borrowed that yet.
That was planned to be done with Safe Drinking Water Loan Program funds, so that's something that is an after-the-fact kind of a thing where you spend it and you get reimbursed, so it's not borrowed up front like we do with the revenue bonds.
Thank you.
Which brings us to the conversation of debt arbitrage. So I'm not going to read this out to you, but I'll try to do a high-level summary. Basically, when municipalities take out debt, it is considered tax-exempt status. So that lowers the interest rate that the municipality has to pay for the debt. The federal government obviously has concerns that they don't want municipalities to take out this low-interest debt, invest it in high-interest investments just to make money. They want, if you're going to take out the debt, they want you to do the project that you're taking the debt out for. They don't want you making money off of the debt. So they call it arbitrage, that difference between the low interest that you're paying on the debt versus the high interest yielding investments that you could be investing in it. In low interest rate environments, this hasn't necessarily been a concern. Obviously, with the high interest rate environments, for these past few years, it's become more and more of a concern. So different ways to get around arbitrage is they have these exceptions. They want you to spend the money quickly. So you can meet one of these exceptions and then you're good to go. If you can have the 100% of the bond proceeds and interest spent within 24 months, you're good. If you cannot meet those, then you are supposed to calculate how much extra interest you earn and send a rebate back to the federal government. One of the conversations that I have had with Rebecca has been, do we want to look at possibly changing how we take out debt? Right now, the past practice has been take out debt beginning of the year based off of the CIP document. Spring, early summer, last year, fell behind and we took it out at the end of the year, but we still took it out for the majority of the CIP projects. Because of ARPA, we made a few adjustments, but for the most part, we took it out based off of the CIP. Do we consider taking out debt after the project is complete? So that that eliminates the rule, any arbitrage concerns, because you would be 100% reimbursing yourself. Everything was already spent. You would basically cash flow the projects and then take out debt to reimburse yourself. Or do we meet somewhere in the middle? That's a conversation that we've been having. Part of that conversation would be, right now, capital projects in the CIP automatically roll forward. So if a project comes in under budget, that budget automatically rolls forward. It helps departments in the fact that all of a sudden they put in an estimate on a future project and they say, oh, the bid came in over my budget, I can do a budget adjustment and move it to this project because that one came in under, this one came in over, just move it over. You've seen those come before council. But then that's the arbitrage concern on how long do we leave it sitting there before we have to move it? Is it getting spent fast enough? So do we try to prevent that by saying, maybe you have to request it to roll forward, saying, okay, we know this road is going to take 2 years. We need this road to roll forward. This truck should be purchased within the year. We're not going to set it to automatically roll forward. So food for thought. Stuff that I've asked Rebecca, like, do we want to consider doing some of these items to try to mitigate this risk? Comments or questions on any of this?
It also eliminates when you can't do a project or situations change and you're not going to do a project, then you haven't borrowed for it.
It paints a clearer picture, correct?
Yeah.
It makes this process easier at this point if we don't have all those things outstanding. Have we been in a position where the arbitrage has been a problem yet, or not yet? Or can't you say?
I'd rather not say.
Perfect.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but like if, we project, and obviously we have to estimate the cost of the project, we don't have finals, at $12 million, it comes in at 10, we have already borrowed that $2 million. Are we ever in a position where we're looking for ways to spend that $2 million because we got it? And maybe that wasn't the best $2 million to spend because,
Yes.
okay. My question should inform my opinion on policy for you.
It also could be advantageous to move away from what we always just take on, because I think I made a comment last night that we usually take on debt in June. That's just what we do. But that may not be advantageous in the marketplace, that you can also pick and choose your moments that if things are looking more favorably in a different timing of the cycle, to put us in a better position financially.
How do you take out debt after the project has been done? What are we funding it with to begin with?
Cash on hand.
Cash at
Okay,
hand.
sure.
That has been in the past.
Contingency funds.
In the past, though, back when I think I got on, when the rainy day fund wasn't, as rainy, that would have been a concern that they wouldn't have been able to fund with cash. We would have gotten too tight.
Right.
Now we've got a healthy general fund that could do that in some cases.
For all projects.
We
right?
couldn't
It'd be
do
like
like
a
the clear wells or,
That's
or
what
something.
some of the larger ones,
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
but it would be like select.
But you
projects.
also wouldn't have to necessarily borrow all of it at the same time.
Right, sure.
Because you can borrow it as you have completion dates. You work with the contractors, like, we'll give you this at this step.
Yeah, we
And
know
then
what's coming.
spread it out over
up.
3 years.
Sure.
So comparing it to personal finances, which are not apples to apples, I would never take out money in June thinking, hey, I'm going to buy a car in November and have to deal with either paying interest on it or being in an arbitrage potential situation if I invested it for that time or anything like that. Like, I want you to have the flexibility to be able to take advantage of good rates if we have, possibilities, but it seems like it would be more favorable to take it out at the time of need, or if we can cash flow it and take it out after even.
Yeah, and we'd have to look from year to year depending upon what is in the program.
Sure.
It also happens to do with how just the general operations are cash flowing, because property tax comes in certain intervals, state aid comes in certain intervals, you know, the accounts don't always look as healthy as you'd want them to look depending on, you know, timing of the year.
Right. And doing the reimbursement, you do have to fill out the declaration of intent to reimburse. And then I think the expense has to be within 18 months. So, I mean, there's still guidelines. So some of these lengthier projects, you know, you might want to include it in 1 or 2 borrowings, you know, like this is the amount we've already spent. And then when you take out debt the next year, this is the amount we've spent since the last borrowing. You know, so there's still different options there. And then we're to next steps. So as Rebecca mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we wanted to do more of the high-level summary tonight. We can obviously talk questions about the CIP and what has been requested so far. We can feel what the council wants going forward, but my assumption was we're going to want probably another CIP workshop in August when we can present a more final document. And then we would have to bring it to Planning Commission in September or October, and then that would bring it back to council in October or November for final approval. And then operating budget, we sent out this calendar last week, I believe, as well. So we have council workshops scheduled for October 14th and 15th. 15th is if needed, and then the public hearing on October 28th. And then the 2026 operations budget will be on the council agenda for November 11th.
So now would be a good time to start digging into the, oh, this is if you want to tell them to fund us.
Again?
Put it up, put your phone up to the TV. I hope it's still right. Yeah, so internally we've talked about, mainly about 2026 and 27. We haven't really gone out further. It's good to have that, just to, you know, project or, you know, for grant opportunities and things like that, but things will change. So, I don't know how this.
Sure, I can help from here.
I didn't watch all those.
No, you're good. You're better off for it sometimes. A couple parts. One, you know, appreciate the clear and on-point messaging in terms of the realities of the 26 budget. Probably say it every year, but this year will probably bring more true that this will be the most difficult budget, you know, that I've done and that we have done now, or will do. Given some of those constraints. You pointed out, we're in the service business. 80% of our operating costs, or, you know, roughly, are people. And when things get tight, it's either programs and services or, you know, people. Not suggesting any particular one area this evening, but that's where it lies. It's program services and people costs. So the state doesn't do us any favors with limiting our levy to net new construction when people are also entitled to reasonable cost of living adjustments. You know, usually for us, that's has historically been 2.5 to, you know, a little over 3 probably historically, maybe the last decade, probably a little bit higher as of recent, closer to the 4, I think, in this last budget. To
be competitive,
yep,
yes.
Correct. So it's just counterproductive. It's counterintuitive, like, you know, your limit's here, but your expenses are going here just based upon trying to do the same thing without even adding anything new, so. Housekeeping, we're hoping to keep this to no more than 7 o'clock tonight, the 2-hour budget workshop. Doesn't have to also go that long either, so don't feel you have to get long-winded on any particular topic.
I may have been a squeaky wheel that said I needed to.
No, that's normal. These are normally about a 2-hour-ish, pretty fair. Also that it's potentially you're adding maybe another one. I know that calendar was a little different than the one you even sent out last week. completely fine. And if
We'll
that's
just
what,
keep you up to date on.
it's also, as needed kind of a thing as well, I think, so. I guess, before we go CIP, anything from like council in terms of some of the operating stuff that Julie's laid out? Brad, I know you're new, and I'm not putting you on the hot seat or making you press your button tonight to speak, but this is great opportunities with the right experts in front of us to ask those questions. If it's not tonight, I haven't met a single staff member who isn't interested in making sure that we're fully informed. So feel free to rattle off as many questions to not only that department head, but also copy on Julie, copy on Rebecca in terms of, so they've got some knowledge of where things are going. And if one person's asking the question, chances are, somebody else is probably thinking it, so. So if there's nothing on the basis of the operations budget, and normally we got the doom and gloom meeting in August, so now we get the doom and gloom meeting in June.
Well, and just to hit that with a fine point, because I know the answer to this, but there's not a lot of fat in this budget that we could just easily trim, correct?
I think there's a little bit, but I'm not gonna say.
There's 6 million?
I'm not gonna say there's 6 million. I'm saying last year we had talked about possibly putting it in vacancy savings and we didn't. But instead, we just did the fund balance drawdown. So can we start looking department by saying, okay, let's not budget for being fully staffed the entire year. Let's look at historics. Let's budget for a little bit of vacancy savings. Like I said, I think we budgeted conservatively, but high for health and dental. But I also don't have WRS rates yet.
Do you know how many total open positions we have right now?
I think it was
That's an unfair
60.
estimate.
60.
Out of a workforce
Like
of
the-
4.
They're not FTEs.
Oh, okay.
Not 60 FTEs,
Sure.
but 60 positions. Some are part-time, and
Sure.
there's fitness instructors or
Sure, a lot of.
library page, those kind of.
So yes, we have some ideas, but not $6 million worth of ideas right off the top. Yeah.
Good. All right. CIP. Public Works generally absorbs a fair amount of our CIP for some reason.
It's like they build the roads.
It's like they do big expensive things.
Well, maybe, and I don't know,
feel
I'm
free.
new to this party, but maybe I think the roads are consistent, they're based on PACER ratings and things like that. Not that I don't want you to talk, but I think the decisions, in my experience with those, are a little bit easier. It's the other things that become a little more challenging, unless you want to stop paving roads, I guess. So.
Oshkosh has done it before. No, I don't.
James, previously, there was a couple, it seems like, projects that you had questions about that were either in or out. Are there any of those this time around for us to consider, or not really? I didn't see it in here, but.
No, not this year. I know in previous years, or it was last year,
Or
2 years in a row, I think we were talking about Furnow Avenue,
Yep.
getting that new connection in. We don't have anything like
Got
that
it.
in the plan this year where we're trying to do something like that has some more
I
flexibility.
didn't think so, but I appreciate it.
And also just so CIP, you said roughly 30 million is what's budgeted right now, so it's 10
That's-
million we're looking at.
Just for geodet.
Potentially, yeah,
Yeah.
having to get rid of. So.
Well, and there's some that is to be determined, and there's some that has levy usage, so that would also, that goes to the gap. So. And we've had the study about the facilities, or the discussion a couple weeks ago, so. Sorry to interrupt.
No, not at all. Because there's no easy starting point on when everything is so intertwined. I get the feeling we may jump around a little bit. I hate to do it to most of you back there, but I think there's about 5 of you that have departments that you are a part of, and there might be 5 seats sitting at this table. Why don't you guys come on up, and it allows us to maybe jump around a little bit more, a little quicker if you all don't mind. And Cammie, feel free to also grab a chair and mosey up if you'd like.
We can all get cozy.
Yeah, so, I mean, one of the things that let me just, at least an overarching general topic to kick it off. How about this? 30 million in general obligation debt is it's a big number. We have a lot of needs, but 30 million is a big number, because that will come home to roost at some point. I have lots of analogies. I'm on an analogy roll with some of you folks.
The Google them all and give you the history.
Right, yes, if you could keep me updated on which ones I get wrong. This isn't a time and a place to say no to projects, but I guess, thoughts on that 30 million and the impact that has going forward on our debt payments. We're up there in terms of how much of our levy is attached to debt, and general obligation hits every single one of the department heads here in terms of their projects, their needs, whether it's capital for equipment or building needs. Can you speak to us a little bit, I guess, on some of the thoughts on that one, your concerns?
So that goes right back to, it will directly increase the tax rate. So the more debt you have, the higher debt levy you need in order to pay the principal and interest payments. That's our debt levy adjustment line item, so we can increase the tax levy to pay those principal and interest payments, but that causes the higher tax rate for the taxpayers. So one way or another, they end up paying for it. It's just that it'll be more spread out. But I think that's why in the past, I know a lot of emphasis has been put on the margin of debt. With equalized values rising, last year I had the big presentation of how that's really not fair, probably not the best tool for everyone to be using at this point. Because even if our debt's rising, our equalized value is rising, so it still looks like our percentage is going down. But the higher the debt will eventually just cause the higher tax rate.
It's not an immediate hit, but it starts compounding fast.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and Matt, I was on long-range finance, and we were working hard to get to the 40% of equalized value, and I know DJ is the rep now, but I can only imagine we take out 30 million and what that would do to that trend line of trying to get down to the 40%.
I don't think, with the way that equalized values have been rising, I think we played with that last year, and it didn't put that much of a hit on that 40%. That's why I think we were trying to say
Sure.
that's kind of that moot point.
We've gotten to a point where it's not as much of a factor maybe to
Right.
consider,
Right.
because the numbers have actually been favorable and consistently favorable now for us,
Right.
where they weren't for a decade plus.
Correct.
Okay. If nobody else has got an idea of how to move forward, at least on this conversation, I'll be happy to kickstart it. Looking at I think in terms of the attachment, it's the CIP project detail. Julie started with the funding summary page.
The sheets you're talking.
One of the options, we can just kind of scroll through the departments. This isn't, I have no interest in going exact line by line, because that's not exactly how it should be done. But there may be some big ones that we want to discuss in terms of prioritization, and maybe how we got to that they're in the 26 budget and not a little farther out, maybe. As soon as she gets it up there, so we can be on the same page. Yeah, if we want to go to page 2, I mean, let's just start with facilities. It's a big one we've been talking about anyways. If you guys are comfortable with me kind of leading us through this a little bit.
Yep.
Top line is, that's been a kind of a placeholder. At one point it was a little lower, but costs are the costs. This is where we allow for you guys to use your professional experience to say what needs to be done and where and when. But City Hall, we haven't given guidance. 3 million in there right away, almost 40 million over 3 years, 4 years. Are we going to be in a spot to even do something in 26 that's substantive?
And was this land acquisition?
If
Design, land, is that?
if we would do something, it would probably be something with land.
Okay.
We have to look at the organizational structure a little bit more, and look into the opportunities that we might have with the county, so will it happen in '26? I don't know for sure, but it could, so.
Sure.
And if we do purchase land, then we're gonna wanna, have, the plans developed for us, so,
Understood.
I mean,
In terms of even fire stations, we've talked about those. This was a lot of the topic, I think, a workshop ago or two, but, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, all need some things over the next coming years. I know fire's not here, but Fitz, that's probably your area. 15 improvements got moved up a little bit. We're like 4 million for improvements to an existing structure is pretty significant. What, maybe high level, what that might entail for 15?
Yeah, we talked a little bit to new Chief Hyman about some of the needs that he thought were a priority, and we discussed, I know the council discussed last night some of the challenges we have with the recruitment, especially for fire. And so these improvements, and feel free to jump in whenever you want, Mike, are designed to help us modernize our station for a more balanced workforce. And one of the things that we don't have the luxury of providing for our employees right now are facilities that accommodate female firefighters and paramedics. So when we have employees or candidates that are, participating on internships, and we show them our living quarters or our working conditions, for those females that may be interested in working for Oshkosh, it's not a real pretty picture. So you want to talk in more detail, Mike, about some of the...
Because, let me ask a more pointed question, maybe
Yeah.
to navigate where you might go.
Yeah.
So what I see is fire station 15, 4 million next year, but then other stations less down the road. It should be the inverse, that something down the road may cost more. There's something more to 15. It's bigger,
Yeah.
there's something extra to that,
Right, there's...
what's that?
You want to talk about the elevator, the other stuff,
Yeah,
Mike?
so we started off this project, we took a second look at it, we ran it past E-Plan services. So E-Plan, we brought in their inspector, we had them look at it, and we needed to know what we had to do ADA-wise. So we're improving so much of the station, we're putting so much money into it. Basically, it came out with the percentage that we're improving and the money we're putting into it, we needed to put in an elevator. So that jumped our initial budget almost double.
Elevators are fun.
Yep. So this project is basically demoing the whole second floor. You're looking at living quarters, showers, bathrooms,
Okay.
making spaces for that changing workforce.
Okay. Feel free to stop me anywhere, but I had one question. The convention center refresh, 2 million. In the past, at least once, if not twice, we've taken advantage of, I think it's state trust fund loans.
I think the funding source is to be determined on that one.
I didn't know if that one was a to be determined or not. I didn't know if that was general obligation or not.
I think it's to be determined
Okay.
to see if we could do
Then-
state trust fund loans.
I don't know what to talk about. That was the only question, was just in terms of getting it out of GO if it was in GO. But I didn't see which one.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you.
I guess in the vein of the fire, I had questions about the training facility. I like that we join them together, but it is a pretty big budget item in the next 3 years. Just maybe a little explanation on what future plans are for that, if there's, I don't know, if there's any consolidation with like one of the fire stations, we could maybe include that in and get a lower budget dollar, I don't know.
I think we've looked at different locations. We have a facility that we inherited from the National Guard Armory on Sawyer Street. And, after looking at what might be required to renovate that to a standard that's going to be usable for police and fire, Rebecca had an opportunity to tour that with some fresh eyes, and I think there was agreement that that's really not going to be the best option for us, especially because it's kind of in a quasi-commercial residential area as well. We didn't think that would be the best fit, and frankly, there's probably a better use that can generate more tax increment for us by using it for a different purpose. So we have initially looked at different locales. We looked at some of our existing property and where we have existing stations as a way to try to co-locate. We've also, considered the possibility of how we might be able to utilize the location to generate potential innovation dollars. That's something I know that the council is very familiar with now. So we haven't, finalized any locale yet, but I think we have a variety of options that we're exploring. Even some of the property by the airport, some of the property that exists by Snell Road. There's quite a few county facilities that are available over there too. The sheriff's department is not too far away. They might be able to utilize that training facility. So we're trying to think comprehensively in a way where we can, potentially work with other entities, but be as efficient as we possibly can.
And Joe, I think it's important to identify that you've got to take this incrementally. One of the things that Rebecca has asked us to do this year with leftover money is to work with the consultant and actually, okay, what do we need? And that can drive the location. A 2 acre piece of property won't do it. A 5 acre piece of property might not do it. So we need to know what we need before we start looking at site locations for those things.
Sure. So Chief, what's the $4 million for this year for if we don't know what the location is anymore? Because I think our presumption was this is still Sawyer, but 14 million for Sawyer, and I hope it's not. It's great to hear that it's probably not. But there's still $4 million in this year for this project.
I think Mike can address that.
And I guess, like John said, we're looking at different locales, we're looking at, different pieces of land. I think that our thought behind that was put money in there, get us in a position to where if there is an opportunity, we can purchase land, we can look at land. That was the thought behind that. And then, I guess, this is a big ticket item, programming this out more than 1 year to kind of spread that out a little bit.
It's going to take architectural work, the design work associated with it, as you're very much familiar with. And,
yes.
And there's a lot of pieces to make this thing come to fruition a few years down the road.
So to Julie's point earlier, is it better to do this after the fact than before the fact? Because we're asking for funding now, correct? What am I misunderstanding here?
We're not gonna, likely, we won't be borrowing until after we do it. So if the land is 2.5 million,
I get that.
then we would just borrow that instead of the 4.
That makes sense. I'm always leery about if we're having a conversation about being concerned about geodebt in general and these numbers being large, that's included in the large number. It's the $4 million.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure we're apples to apples as it is doomy and gloomy, and that's the whole point of this. But if we're being doom and gloom for a purpose that's to be determined yet we don't know what it is, there's no reason to beat ourselves up about something that is likely not to happen.
I think that we'll know what it is before the end of this year.
Great.
Based upon Rebecca's ask of us to start working with consultants now.
Yep, and we'll know the next time we revisit the subject whether there's $4 million in that line item specifically for this or not at that point in time, right?
Yeah,
probably when you say revisit the subject.
August.
Of this year? No. We won't know by then.
Got it. But we'll know that it won't be by then.
We won't know that. We won't know the size by then.
I get it.
The scope of it.
But we will have to have a finalized number at some point in time, and that may not be $4 million if we don't know what it is.
Right.
Right. Got it.
Just to add to this, if you remember in the 2025 CIP, council has 7.7 million for fire.
We remember.
Okay.
We all remember.
So right now, our full intent, based off of conversations with Rebecca, is we would not borrow that 7.7 because of this. So that's why we listed this as geo borrowing with the intent that even though it was in the 2025 CIP, if there's any money spent on like a study or something, we would borrow for that.
Oh.
But we would not borrow the full 7.7 million.
Got it.
So, one more question on this. It's kind of the value judgment of what we did first, second, with the sequencing a little bit is. So, the sequencing of putting the training center at 14 million over 3 years before renovations to 17, 18, and 19. I guess I don't know whose responsibility is to talk about why that one was, the more important factor.
Sure.
What prioritized that? And I know this given, let me just preface it with, I understand these are all recruitment tools. These are all facility needs that we need to house our, public safety folks in the right spaces.
Sure. Treat
them appropriately, given the age that we are in. As well as we are trying to attract the best talent, and our firehouses don't look that way. And if we don't have great training apparatuses for people to do their thing, they have interest.
They look elsewhere.
They do.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I understand.
Yep.
But competing interests say somebody said, this thing's more important than these things.
Yeah, I can speak to that, sure. I think council's the answer. When we came to council, we talked about the training facility being the most important thing, along with City Hall. Council told us, hey, we don't like the idea of dueling training facilities. Go back to the drawing board and bring it back to us with another idea. So we talked to police and fire. We said, hey, council doesn't like this dueling training thing. We need to rethink this. We had those discussions. We looked at our existing facility, and Rebecca agreed. And that's why we prioritized, one of the reasons why we prioritized the training facility. In addition to what Rebecca mentioned earlier, that we're going to be doing some extensive studies of our staffing and how we can meet some of those challenges that she talked about earlier. And to have City Hall move forward before we can make that picture more complete didn't make quite as much sense. Just to back up to Councilmember Larson's question, to give him a little more detail on what we're going to be doing with the training facility. Because we had some monies programmed to take a look at the Sawyer Street facility, I think we have an open PO with SEH. So we have some monies that are available to take a look at some plans and some design work. We can capitalize on that without spending any additional dollars. We have to decide, who we're going to work with yet. We've talked to police and fire, and they have some ideas based on their discussions with their colleagues in other communities, and we have some familiarity with some different firms. But I think the idea is to try to get moving on the planning part, as Chief Smith said, as soon as possible. And then, as Rebecca mentioned earlier, maybe try to secure the land. That's kind of the plan. But in terms of the sequence of those two elements, actually three elements, with City Hall, the fire facility, and the training facility, that's why we thought the training facility would be the first thing to focus on. And then talking about these other items.
Further questions? Anything else within facilities that you have questions on? I know there's museum, opera house, in terms of physical facilities. Okay. I don't know if we want to go through I don't think we'd have time to go through every single specific tab, but
Pick some random one.
I think
If you
this-
want me to
let's
jump
just-
around.
let's do it and see what happens.
So, I guess senior center sign. It's going from we have like a wood one right now, going to like a digital sign. I guess my opinion is I think a lot of that marketing can be done on Facebook instead of going digital. I mean, just want to give a background or rationale. Is that sign in rough shape or?
Yeah, the sign that is there is was made in-house a number of years ago, like the signs that we have at West Algoma, South Park, and previously at Menominee Park. And as we start to look at doing some of the electronic messaging centers at Menominee, South Park, and a new one at the Leach, because the new one at the Leach was from 2006, I think, so it's the original. This is one where we talked to Dan and we said, we're replacing these. It's saving staff time because it's all cloud-based. So we don't have a staff member, whether it's Parks or Senior Center, going out to those sites once or twice a week, changing the message and doing so. So it was a matter of getting a little better technology, being able to put more than one program or event on the sign.
So I'll chime in for a second. Nothing against this sign or that place, but in this day and age, I don't see a point for those signs, period, and anywhere. Because, it's not a highly trafficked road. I'm not driving by there going, oh, I'd like to go to that program because I saw it on that sign. It's just, I don't see the value in that programmatically anymore because it's everywhere else but signs. Just a grain of salt, I'm not trying to be a grump about it, but electronic message board signs, I just don't see the purpose in a city. Because it's not driving traffic to your cause at that point. It's just, I can't see how that helps because nobody's out there waiting to hear what class there's going to be. There's other ways to get the message.
Yeah, I guess I have similar thoughts, and if we do genuinely need this, I haven't seen the sign, it sounds like it was.
I saw it today, I see it every day on my way past there, it looks fine, it looks like all the other signs we have. I don't know why we've spent time putting letters in it, because there's, again, nobody out there waiting to see what the letters are gonna be. It's just not that kind of, there's different ways to get that message.
Yeah, I would agree. If we need a new sign, I'd be okay with a new sign, but like the digital portion of it, I'm not super enthused about either way. I'm also not a big digital sign guy. I don't like the way they look, but that's maybe a personal preference.
Any more?
Yeah, otherwise I
Go ahead.
I can keep going through a few things. We had, I think it was weird on page numbers. I guess the Public Works, the radios, do you want to go over a little bit of what the issue is there? And I guess thought came to mind, do we have city issued cell phones? Is that a savings at all, or is this, you want to give background a little bit?
Yeah, some of the background, all of the heavy vehicles in particular, but even the pickup trucks all have two-way radios in them. We have a couple of repeater stations throughout the city. Those repeater stations are failing. They are on an analog system, and at such time as any of the infrastructure behind them that's owned by the utilities fails, they're gone. The utilities, AT&T, I believe that's what, if there's a failure on one of their copper lines, they're not fixing it. So right now, we do have parts of the city that we do not have communication with. As far as using the radios, they're, I think, especially during some of our operations, take snow hauling, for example, I believe radios are a safer, more efficient communication than trying to use cell phones while you're trying to move around. Another one of the benefits with the radios is access to the facilities. The gates are, you key the mic and you can open the gates into the grounds. So there's other operational things where you don't have to, either try, have your badge on you, which they generally don't when they're in their truck, because otherwise the badges will get lost and destroyed. So then they're not able to get through the gate. With all the equipment, with the radios, key the mic and it opens the gate. Allows them to communicate throughout the city, as they're doing operations as well.
Okay. Yeah.
Is it, most cities do it that way? I had never thought about it until right now, if I'm being really honest, but it seems like that's an antiquated, not, it's a bad way necessarily, I get everything you're saying, James, but it seems like there might be a simpler solution than that.
It does seem antiquated, but sometimes that's what works best.
It is page 8, I believe. I just had a question I saw for parks. There's a CNG, is that compressed natural gas?
Correct.
Dump truck. Unless I missed something, but I know we were talking, I thought we were going away from CNG trucks.
Yeah, that title is actually the truck vehicle that we have that we are getting rid of,
Got it,
trading
okay.
that out.
So we're
So
not
yes.
getting another one of
We are not. We've been phasing those out the last couple of years. I think we have possibly 2 left that we will be getting rid of due to inefficiencies. So yeah, it's a little confusing how it's listed there.
Yeah, I was worried that we were getting another one when,
You weren't the only one that had the question.
Oh, sorry.
I was going to talk a little bit about the bridge, just because it's a big ticket item, the pedestrian bridge, but I also know that a lot of that is coming from other sources of money, so I just kind of wanted to fully understand where we're at with that, what.
Right now, the Federal Highway Administration and USDOT had, their staff that were working on our grant agreement had been instructed to stop working on the grant agreement with the new administration that came in. They have since started working on it again, but we did have to go back and kind of start over because there were a lot of, I'll say, clauses in the agreement that they changed. So we are working through, again, re-reviewing and getting that grant agreement in place. So we're probably at the same spot we were about 10 months ago.
I have concern, do you have any concern that we're going to get halfway in and the funding is going to change again and we're going to get stuck with the whole bill?
While I can't say nothing will never happen, what I have seen with the changes in funding that happened recently, projects that were already committed, obligated, all the agreements signed remained. It was the ones that were not quite to that stage yet are the ones that had, gotten changed.
I can maybe even echo that sentiment. I think hard to figure out sometimes what the federal government is doing, but at this point, I think stuff that's in place is going to stay there. It's stuff that hasn't been obligated or hasn't like a signed contract of some sort that is the more risky stuff. This is not that.
Just knowing from transit funding comes from a similar source. So once you get in a grant obligated, then I haven't ever seen that go away. But the trick is to get it in obligated. Once it's obligated, then they committed to it. And that's what, I don't think we're quite there yet, but we're pretty close.
We're getting close. I know when the USDOT staff were told to stop working on it, we were within a month of having it finalized.
In regards to that project, if we can stay on that one for a moment, I don't remember this being presented to council almost in any way, other than, I think it got put in the budget, but to me it was, we'll tell you about it later, quite honestly. So I don't know anything about the where, the why, how it even came about. I'm just trying to figure out, we still gotta, if this is a $10 million bridge, we still gotta find $2 million, but I don't know what problem we're trying to solve with this particular project. I don't need that tonight, but at some point it'd be good to know why we're even potentially considering doing this thing. And
I think we can touch on it a little bit tonight if you want us to. Over the history, Interstate Highway 41 has been a significant pedestrian and bicycle barrier for getting from one side to the other. There have been a lot of deaths from people deciding they wanted to try to cross the highway rather than using one of the overpasses. With all of the roundabouts at almost all of the overpasses now, again, that is, while they're very effective at moving vehicles, there are challenges with pedestrians and bicycles because drivers are taught, look left, but the bicycles and the pedestrians are coming from your right. So I know, Jim, you do a lot of looking at the accident reports and things. So that's been one of the big concerns is, dealing with bicycle and pedestrian accidents at those crossings. As far as the location, it was the location that we've been looking at is near to West High School, Taft Avenue area. So it would be getting to a point, the connection on the east side is going to a lot of destinations. You have West High School, you have the Pollock Water Pool, Water Center, I don't know exactly what you call it.
Water Park.
Water Park, thank you. So there are a lot of destinations on the east side where it's connecting to.
Yeah, and it's been in the bike and pedestrian plan since 2011. And it was again in the update in 2019, which both were approved by council. I know additionally that this was part of the comprehensive safety action plan that East Central helped the city put together, and I believe it at that point, and I can't speak because I don't know this for sure, but it would have went through the policy board and the transportation committee, I would think at some point, which there are council members that are involved in those things. So I think that maybe it wasn't top of mind at some point in time, just because that it's always just been kind of in planning, you know, but it became more of a reality when East Central did the comprehensive safety action plan, and then the projects that were identified as scoring the highest based on, like James alluded to, some of the safety aspects of it. That one kind of rose to the top when that group was looking at it. And then from there, it triggered some grant applications and work there that, you know, it's never guaranteed you're going to get a grant. So it's one of those things where once it's in all those planning documents and you're trying to solve a safety problem like that, you apply for them, and then, you know, it is a little bit of luck, but you have a good case and you get that grant, then you take advantage of it, which, you know, it should be 80% funded.
Right, and I think, you know, to your point too, Mayor, we didn't know necessarily if we were going to ever get funded, and if we never got funded, it would have been difficult for us to even consider this. But because we're on the cusp of it, it was like, hey, maybe we have a real chance to do this now because of the potential 80% funding. So I think that's why it seemed a little bit more abrupt, because it was kind of, as Jim described, kind of under the surface, because we didn't think it was reachable for us until we received news that we had a chance to get this.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that comprehensive safety action plan at East Central that really helped it rise, because it really demonstrated the safety issues there were with Highway 41 in particular.
Absolutely.
The crossing and the roundabout.
East Central did a tremendous job for us in that regard, so.
But we got that grant, correct? It sounds like we're discussing it.
Well, it's kind of being.
We're seeing the news about it.
We've been notified of it. We don't have the agreement executed, so.
But it's been put on hold by the new administration right now, so.
Since we're on the topic, can you help me understand exactly where it connects? I know the general area, but I get asked a lot, and I want to be able to point to it a little bit better.
Or is there potentially a reason that you don't want to talk about because of land acquisition?
Certainly that is one
Okay.
avenue that we have been looking at, would require some acquisition.
Okay, so the general area is what we have right now. Okay, got it.
Sorry to cut you off.
No, that's fine.
There may have been some other reasons.
Yep.
Okay. There was, I know a question that was kind of posed to me. I'll try to frame it as best as possible for council. Collaboration, that may not be even the right word, between departments. So, for example, we have parks across the street from Public Works. Everybody's doing different things all over the city, but in terms of equipment needs and equipment that, from small, you know, in facility equipment to, you know, skid steers and dump trucks and front end loaders and mowers across the board. Having stuff spread out to different departments for ease of use, you know, how efficiently are we using these resources that are provided by the taxpayers? You know, I think what I'm asking is, you know, does everybody have the same trailer laying around and it's not being used all the time? That type of a sentiment and a question that gets asked. I think, is that?
I think, you know, some of that equipment, like lawnmowers and things like that, during the summer months, you know, our staff, between us, we're using all of them that we have almost every single day.
And a lot of those for us become snow removal machines in the wintertime as well.
And I think it's not even just equipment. I look at some of like the vehicles, not like your heavy equipment, but like the personal, I don't know how to describe it, like smaller cars,
The trucks
staff
and-
cars, yeah. I mean, if there, I know we all kind of have these vehicles we all want, but if there was just one area where there was cars for people to go take, I don't know if there's some ability to limit how many of those we're buying and share a little bit more. Yeah.
We don't know, so we're asking.
Yeah.
Like, in terms of.
Sure. Yeah, we don't really have a large fleet of cars per se. I mean, we have some here at City Hall. We have some, obviously, with police, a few more with fire. We do have a lot of trucks that we have that are utilized for a variety of different purposes, but, like some municipalities have fleet services, where they just have a tremendous amount of fleet. We don't do that. We pay a lot of mileage costs occasionally because of certain amounts of travel, but we don't have a huge fleet, I would say, comparatively to other municipalities in the context that you're talking about.
And we do have a lot of staff that, as John indicated, are using their personal vehicles and being reimbursed. I know as far as engineering goes, all of our construction project inspectors, with the exception of the sidewalk program, they're all using personal vehicles.
I'll compound the question in a different kind of way. It's the same one I asked last year, so I apologize. I wasn't going to add anything up, but we're going to get beat up because we have lots of, I know we don't have a lot of vehicles compared to other places, but the general public thinks we have lots of vehicles because they see them everywhere, and they're always beautiful. So I belabored this point far too long last year. I won't do it again this year, probably. But I went through and totaled this up. There are $4.1 million in vehicles, heavy equipment and passenger vehicles in 2026, excluding police cars and excluding buses. That's a large dollar amount. It always is. And it's the same discussion I had last year. I have personal doubts that useful life is the exact correct criterion for this in every instance, but the justification for all these vehicles is essentially useful life. And I understand we just had a long discussion about facilities. Deferred maintenance is an awful policy. We're not going to do that with our buildings, but I'm not ever going to be sold that that's the same policy that applies to vehicles. It's just not. So, broad question, I don't need an answer necessarily, but to that point, I think it's great that in the facilities portion of this, we allocate $750,000 every year for HVAC roofing replacement. And then we have faith that those items are replaced in a responsible manner. I love that very much. Maybe there's a way we do that same thing and put the faith and the trust back in the people who do this department-wide, that the right vehicles are being replaced at the right time for the right dollar amounts. Because I promise you, we're going to get emails. There's less mileage in this year than there was last year, because last year all these vehicles had miles in them too. And I got beat up because we're replacing aluminum-bodied Ford F-150s with 30,000 miles on them. And I want to take that truck home. I don't want to get rid of that truck. You know what I mean? And that's the emails we get. So that's a big, broad, conceptual thing. I'm not necessarily for an answer, James, but
well, I can give you. I get what you're saying.
Yep.
And, if I can give a little bit of information
for
to
sure.
that, I know a lot of times that is what the sheets say, but especially in our department, we've been doing this for a long time, and I know as we've been meeting with Rebecca, our staff in the garage are going to help out other departments more with it. Is taking a very careful look at what are we spending on maintenance on vehicles?
Yep.
Because that is how we've been prioritizing equipment for many years. I might have 3 trucks that are roughly the same age, but if 2 of them I'm not spending anything on maintenance, well, I'm not looking at replacing those. I'm kicking them down the road.
Perfect.
But if I got one that I'm spending 20-30% of what it would cost to buy a new one in maintenance every single year, I'm looking at getting rid of that one.
Yep, I think we all understand that. The hard part is from the outside perspective, and even ours, that on paper, I trust you to do that, and I know that's how it works. But as we're making plans and as we're budgeting for these things, that's not how it reads.
I think one of the other things we're gonna look at working with your staff is just how many miles are your vehicles used per year.
Yep.
So instead of looking at it necessarily when they're asking to be replaced, like if someone's just using a vehicle for like 300 miles a year, there has to be a very good reason
Yep.
that they have that vehicle. Otherwise, someone else who needs a vehicle
Yes.
should have that vehicle. So just a little more analysis of those details.
I think that'd be great. And again, it reads as if we rely pretty heavily just on a useful life equation. And I know that that's not always the case, but it does read that way.
And I think, maybe, there's a way we can change the wording, but I know in talking with my staff, when they say useful life, they are referring to the maintenance records, and, maintenance is exceeding, a certain amount of what it would cost to replace
Yep.
that vehicle.
It's not just it's a specific year trigger
Correct.
There's factors that go into it.
I understand that, that's a different answer than I got last year, maybe not in this meeting, but when I asked a different person directly about that, it was equated as if we treat it the same way as furniture. The useful life of furniture, when it meets that, we replace it. That's not always the same for a truck, it's just not.
No, it's not, and, as you may recall, one of the things that we talked about a lot, 10 to 15 years ago, as we were working on the field operations facility, was, improving the life span of our vehicles.
Yep, and we do a great job with that, same as we do with buildings.
And our heavy trucks at Street Division, we went from needing to replace those every 10 years to we're getting 15
Yep.
years out of those vehicles now before they start having, major issues. And that's because we're able to wash them regularly, take care of them, do preventative maintenance, keep them more secure from the elements, when they're being stored. So, those are some big improvements that we have seen.
Totally agree.
Downtown visualization implementation. Am I allowed to know what that is? This looks like an exciting item, and I didn't know what the, is that for?
Under planning.
It's page 2, right? It's 227. It's
10 at the top.
I think that's a placeholder for potential land acquisition, if I
Doesn't say
remember the
anything.
conversation correctly.
Yeah, this is for possible land acquisition. So it could come to fruition
Sure.
or not.
Yeah, no, I was just curious. I
Yeah.
like our downtown. I think these projects are exciting. So it's like in relation to the downtown vision plan that was just done, if there were potential acquisitions in relation to that plan, is that the idea?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I guess similar question, there was one, I think like a South Main Street or something, acquisition.
Yeah, over $3 million over the next several years to acquire land along South Main. Now, is this also, this is in relation to a different meeting that's happening tonight?
Yes.
Yeah, so the South Main.
The South
reconstruction
Main
estate.
Street reconstruction, resurfacing, implementation of South Main Street from the Sawdust District plan. Obviously right at the bridge, with the buildings adjacent, there's some constraints there, but once we get past those first couple of buildings, getting the wider right of way to have South Main Street look like it does as you get closer to the arena. That was all part of the Sawdust District visioning plan.
And also the gateway improvements. I think it was 9th Street gateway improvements. I just saw potential underground utilities, so it piqued my interest.
Certainly the 9th Avenue gateway improvements has been a topic of construction for a very long time, topic of discussion, I should say, for a very long time. Certainly, that would be one, as we've talked about undergrounding, and as you maybe saw with the draft documents that you received last night, gateway corridors are a focus for looking at doing that. At the end of the day, do I think undergrounding is going to happen on 9th Avenue? I have my high doubts because of the proximity of all of the structures to the street. But another potential avenue we can look at is, maybe instead of being underground, having, aerial down both sides, so you don't have the crisscross of all of the wires. Again, that's a very, very significant aesthetic improvement. So, I don't remember exactly where it falls in the plan, document, but again, it's going to be starting to look at, okay, what can we do? Where do we potentially need to try to either get some easements or some acquisition and start working on design and working with the utilities to come up with options to improve the aesthetics of that 9th Avenue corridor.
I have a utility infrastructure question. So I think I sent an email off on storm laterals, mini storm laterals.
Yes.
In the properties. We do two different things. One, we reconstruct a street and it's just automatic. Everybody gets a mini storm lateral. We charge them
Everybody gets a storm lateral, yes.
into their yard.
Yeah, the reference to mini storm is often, if there's not storm sewer in front, we'll run a small storm sewer up the terrace usually to get laterals, but yes.
So storm lateral into the yard through every full rebuild. We also allow residents to request a storm lateral on their property, and then when appropriate, when we can, we tie it onto a contract. And
generally, we have a contract every year to construct storm laterals. As you indicated, it is request. Some of those requests are ordered to be requests, shall we say, due to some pump discharges to the sidewalk and street causing public nuisances.
so my question actually goes to attempting to control costs to our taxpayers, to our property owners, in terms of the construction costs that we pass on. As well as, is this, it can be looked at two ways, I suppose, in terms of the storm water utility. Storm water utility is significantly subsidizing
Yes.
those storm laterals to the tune of thousands of dollars per property when we do this. Give me one to get there, then feel free. Is it the best use of those dollars, or could we instead be doing more stormwater projects? And or instead of using, significantly subsidizing with the utility that everybody pays, that's one way we could be reducing the rates or holding the line on the rates, or reducing or keeping it as lower than we're advancing those rates. It's just another option, I guess, but we haven't talked about that. That's not been something we've ever asked in terms of, is that still the right policy for this point in time and moving forward to significantly subsidize that program?
Right, as we talked about in the email exchange, on the street reconstruction program, generally it's about $4,000 per storm lateral in cost. And the assessment to the property owner is generally $750. Whereas the policy, as it relates to water and sewer, would, a new lateral installation would be 100% charged, and relays are 50/50.
So just my question, and I'm not expecting an answer tonight because there isn't one, but is that still a good policy? Is that still the best use of those stormwater dollars that we're pulling in from the ratepayers? Is it still are we still achieving whatever goal we tried to start achieving when we set that out? I know one of the things that former city manager was, he was a fan of it because it solved a lot of neighbor issues. But that's a significant amount, $500,000 a year in terms of the contracts, the project work, but yet a small amount is coming back from those who are benefiting directly from that. So I think it's more of an overarching, a bigger policy issue. I just have a question on it.
That's what I was just going to say. It's a policy discussion for us to have.
But I'm just not sure that was a council directive. It may have been an internal policy. I don't know that because that predated me, I believe. But just at some point in the future, we keep talking about rates. We haven't talked about rates here at all, but every time we do a project, it's going to drive up the rate.
I think there were some concerns aesthetically that were brought forward by council too about, you might see homeowners that have storm discharge, on their lawn and stuff like that, and then there were neighbors that were complaining about that, not only aesthetically in the summer, but also in the winter, and some of the problems that those have caused. And I think there was a thought that providing that option helps bury that discharge, just like we were talking about the aesthetics of burying the undergrounding utilities of electrical, so.
And maybe it's just a different cost share at this point.
Sure.
Because I think that 750 is been the same for I think,
Yeah.
the entire program.
There have been a few changes to it over the years. I think when I started, it was maybe around 250.
Sure.
And when we changed from everybody just having an underground pipe to putting an inlet structure up to the surface, that's when it went to 750. Another part of the subsidy is, on a lot of those, the utilities paying the permits for those to get connected to as well on the private side. Those are, I believe, a lot of those policy decisions predate even me being here, but, those were policy decisions when the resolutions that altered the special assessment policy, were adopted.
And I think, it may not be a 26 budget thing, but between now and the next rate increase, I think it would be a healthy thing for us to learn more about and provide, more relevant guidance possibly, how we move forward in the future on that and some of these things. Other areas of interest? Still got a little time if we want it.
Yeah, I got a question on page 10, the Great Neighborhoods Initiative. I love the program, I'm all for it, but I thought in our discussions last year that we were expecting them to start raising more private side funding and weaning down from public funding. Was I?
This isn't for Goshen.
Oh, that's not, okay.
Yeah, this is that grant every year that neighborhoods can apply for.
Oh, got it, okay.
I always get confused too because it's like, I think you guys call it like Healthy Neighborhood Initiative. They're very similar names.
Okay.
Rebecca, anything specific you want us to, that we haven't chatted on that was of a high interest to you?
I don't have anything. I don't know if any of the departments. I don't know.
You all have things in here, so if there's something you want to chat about, a lot of them are routine. Police cars are routine, and street light poles are, I don't want to talk about light poles.
He does that.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Nodding heads.
Some of these things are pretty routine year after year, but.
Our biggest thing is we're here to answer questions that you have.
I know that, but so I do have one more question. Parks. If we could turn, where's the actual park improvements?
Page 16?
Not buildings, but actually like parks.
Like Abbey Park and Splash Pad.
Yeah. Parkland improvements, yeah, page 16, if you'll turn your hymnals. I'm on it tonight. I'm on a roll. So, actually page 17 towards the bottom, I have a question. I understand how it's historically been done with between the Parks Advisory Board. You give them kind of a list of recommendations to the board agrees, disagrees, changes it, sends it on our way for us to review here. We know we have certain deficiencies in this city with different parks, accessibilities and the distance traveled to get there for some to enjoy green space in whatever form it looks like. West Algoma Park, which by the way is not in Algoma or on Algoma.
It's very confusing.
It can be. I actually had to remember to which one it was. And I'm not particularly picking on this one, but I'm picking on this one because within 3 to 4 blocks, not even a mile, we have the park at the corner of Sawyer and
Rainbow Memorial.
Well, we have Rainbow Memorial and the one across the street with the pole stack.
Abe Roshland.
Abe Roshland, yep. So you've got Rainbow Memorial Park. That's a multi-use facility. You've got Abe Roshland, which is a shelter and playground area. We've got Algoma Park, and then we also have right across the street.
Mary Jewel.
Mary Jewel, thank you. and Lakeshore Park as well. So within a small condensed amount of space, we have 5 parks, four parks, 5 parks technically, within a very short distance, very condensed. And I'm just wondering if I'm being very careful not to suggest we close a park down, but I'm just wondering if, with the density of those in such a small amount of space, if that is the best use of those funds to support that many parks, when we haven't done much in terms of activating Lakeshore Park beyond building the pavilion, which is beautiful there, but we haven't done a whole lot there. We've got other parks that we are not maintaining or that we would like to improve. Just given the density of those 5 within such a short amount of walking distance, is that the best use of those funds?
Yeah, I think and I'm just going to speak, years ago, as the city developed and progressed to the west, that they looked at, all right, we need to ensure that we have proper parkland for this new subdivision or the new area. So for the Abe Roshland and West Algoma, as far as having play equipment in each of those, again, we take a look at having a young child in the neighborhood not being safe to cross Oshkosh Avenue, not being safe to cross Sawyer Street. So it comes down to safety, more of the neighborhood feel, kind of like your neighborhood school, almost a neighborhood park. I don't think we do a lot of big amenities in a lot of those little neighborhood parks. Yes, there's play equipment, and that's probably the biggest expense. But again, I think it comes down to more of, as the city was developing, making sure there's parkland set aside, but then also the safety issue of some of those roadways.
You didn't answer my question, but I didn't expect you to either. No, I know. It's more just, it's not philosophical, but it's really just, I think it's just higher level in terms of, we have many needs. We admit that. And for years, I've talked about your space as a multitude of unfunded mandates. Trying to keep up with that operationally as well as CIP, we're hitting a breaking point in terms of even the suggestion of adding new is very difficult to try to support operationally moving forward. For every one of these every new one we add, I know the operational needs that follow that, and we've gotten as creative as we can get, in my opinion. So just not sure that how we've always done it is how we get to keep doing it, I think is maybe my thought on that one. I'm one of 7 though, so, and plenty more time to discuss.
You will get the Advisory Parks Board recommended projects as well. Those are included in the 26, yep. But I will email each of you that listing as well.
Appreciate it.
Jim, I know that this is another one that's 80% fed, but the transit data boxes, it's not that big of a ticket item once we get that 80%. Could you talk a little bit about what that is?
Sure. So currently, basically our database for transit, it's a multitude of things. Right now, when I started, we had a developer that was developing transit software he was going to sell eventually. So he worked with us for free for the first 9 years to develop this database that we use. So we have basically, we still use him. It's very inexpensive. It's kind of a one-man show. He has developed our database. He's also developed our app, which was good to start. Technology's kind of outpaced it. He had some issues with Apple and Google had changed some things, so he had to rewrite the whole thing in the last year, so it was down for about 6 months. And then it also, the other thing that we're required to do, that we're mandated to do, is our drivers have to announce major stops so that if anybody is disabled or visually impaired, they know where they are on the bus. So our drivers do that manually now. They have to call out, I'm at Sawyer and Witzel or wherever that is. So we don't currently have an annunciation system or a destination signs. So what the software would do, it would be these, basically, it's kind of like a data box that does a little bit of everything. So it would allow us to basically move forward and modernize our technology. It would allow better vehicle location. We also have automatic passenger counters, which are kind of a separate thing that feed into the database. It would allow for that data to be used better, but it would also allow for automatic stop annunciation. So instead of drivers calling it out, it would, by GPS, it would say, all right, your next stop is Sawyer and Witzel. It would have visual displays that would show where your next 4 stops are. So if you're not familiar with the community, right now you get on the bus, unless you ask the driver or passenger, you're not really sure where you're going or where you should stop. So it does a lot of those things. This system, we would have to put out for request for proposal, but Appleton and La Crosse and Waukesha are the 3 I'm aware of that have implemented something similar in the last 5 years or so. So their initial startup was $300,000 to $400,000, and then their annual cost after that was about $30-some thousand, which our annual cost now is about $30-some thousand. So there's initial cost up front, however, then after that it's a pretty manageable annual cost. So it'd be mostly this, and it would be, we are going to apply for grant funding. So again, it's similar. When we apply for those grants, if we get them, it's 80%, it's great. If we don't get them, the thing, it gets kicked down the road basically. We're hoping that with our transit facility that we're currently going to be putting out for bid shortly, we've pretty much exhausted all our Transit Cares Act funds. We have ARPA transit funds that are going to be used for that transit center. We have some other things like one of the buses is already funded. We're working on funding the second bus. So it needs to be in our plans so that if we do have the funding available, that we can use it for those purposes. So it's a little bit of an unknown. However, I think it is something that we're going to need in the near future, and hopefully it will get 80% funded at whatever point we get that. We just don't know exactly when that'll be. But to continue to rely on, the person and company we work with are great. They have been for a long time, but how sustainable is that in the future? That's questionable. We also have, basically our mainframe computer for all our transit technology is a PC, which I don't think is the best solution. We probably should do something cloud-based that's a little more modern. So it would modernize basically our database as well as vehicle location, the passenger counters, the stop annunciation, the destination signs. It would do a lot of things.
Yeah, I can just add to what Jim said about the risk associated with a one-man band person who does your application, and I think maybe his daughter is going to take over for him. Isn't that right, Jim? But, he asked our thoughts from an IT perspective too, and it wasn't a good long-term strategy for us to invest in something like that. So that's part of the thought process, I think, too, just from a safety and security and long-range perspective on this, that it does a great job, but it's kind of a risky proposition to continue as we have it.
Yeah, it's a little bit risky. The benefit to it is we've saved a lot of money over the years, and we are the current only client, so we get a lot of attention, although it's not the primary focus. So we get whatever time this person has left after his regular full-time job, which he's, like I said, he's done a great job with it. It's just, I don't know how sustainable that is.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
I'll go with a comment. I want everything in the plan, and I will not be able to support a $30 million debt borrowing.
You want cake and you want to eat it too?
Absolutely.
Whatever the analogy is.
Of those two options, I won't vote to support a $30 million. It's just not sustainable for Oshkosh residents.
Let me piggyback on that. I hadn't intended to. So, as we kind of wrap up a little bit, maybe parting thoughts. 30+ million in general obligation debt currently within the plan, with another 2.4 to be determined possibly. This plan, and James and I shared a couple emails, this doesn't include the Clear Wells project of nearly 40 million that was previously budgeted and has been previously budgeted for the last decade to 15 years, but is not in this budget. And of that possible 40 million, because we don't know what the real number is yet, there's a possibility that 3, 4, 5 million, 4 million-ish,
Our estimate was 4.
4 million-ish, is still potentially that the Public Service Commission will say the ratepayers are not responsible for, and that we would need to find somewhere else, whether that's general obligation, whether that's cash, some other function, some other funding source, and that is not in here either. And that is a project that needs to get going a decade ago.
Well, and as you saw in the water utility sanitary survey, the DNR is, hey, why isn't this done? Well, as we've talked, we're still waiting on the Public Service Commission.
So, but I really think Clearwell should be in this budget, but somebody else can figure that out. To Carl's point, a $6 million plus operational deficit at this moment. It's on paper, but it's not real yet, but it's pretty close. And this much debt is unsustainable, even in a short 1 year look ahead. I think my last analogy of the evening will be to sharpen the pencil and in some cases find the eraser, because this can't be what we look at in November.
I'll shorten it, we can't look at this in August. And Matt usually gives this speech, so I'm only going to touch on it. We ultimately approve the budget, but we look to you guys to present us an executive budget that, it's not appropriate for us to go line by line. We've asked you guys a lot of questions, obviously, and thank you guys for your candor and your answers. But I know that the council does not want to get into having to find places to find an eraser. I think you guys know that, and we know that.
Okay. Rebecca, Julie, anything you want to put after that?
I don't think there's anything to say after that. I'll get some pencils and a big eraser.
Okay. Thank you for staff, all the effort up to this point, continued effort going forward. We know this takes a lot of time. It's an annual thing, and it's an important thing. It's the most important thing we do annually, and so we appreciate all the effort into putting this together. So thank you for being here tonight, and we will see you all in a couple weeks. Thank you.
Thanks.